welcome to a new show on UK Health Radio here. Hurt less, live more. Now, I've got with me in the studio, I'm JJ, the practical alchemist. So you might know my voice. I've had a show on UK Health Radio for a while now called Alchemy 101. But I'm here with a new voice on UK Health Radio, and that's Dr. Mark Goulston, who is a psychiatrist and a philosopher. And we've also got in the studio Johann Ilgenfritz, who's the CEO of UK Health Radio, and he's come on to talk to us today because he's got a fantastic story to hear if you haven't already heard it. So welcome to Johann. But first of all, I just want to say welcome to Mark and really tell us a bit more about you. And also, I'll let you tell the story of how this show came about.
Thank you, JJ and Johann. All my life, all my professional life, I've been focused on helping people to hurt less so they can live more. One of my specialties was suicide prevention. And a lot of times people don't want to die. They just want to get out of the hurt. And, most of us have a backstory. And part of my backstory is I dropped out of medical school twice, probably for untreated depression. And the second time I dropped out, they actually wanted to kick me out because they were about to lose money on me again. And the head of the school sent called the dean of students, who cared more about students than about money. And I was at a low point in my life and didn't think I was worth too much. And the dean of students shared the letter from the head of the school, and it said that he met with Mr. Goulston. I wasn't a doctor then, and we talked about different professions, and he was advising the promotions committee that I'd be asked to withdraw, which was a nice euphemism for being kicked out. And the dean of students told me this, and I said, "What does it mean?" And he said, "You've been kicked out." And I actually folded over. I just bent over. And then he hit me with the trifecta of hope. So I was hurting and falling. And the trifecta of hope is unconditional love, seeing a future for me and going to bat for me. And he said, you didn't mess up because you're somehow passing everything, but you are messed up. But I have a feeling that if you got unmessed up, this school would be glad they gave you a second chance. And I just started to cry with his compassion. And then he said, and here's the first leg of the trifecta of hope. He said, and even if you don't get unmessed up, even if you don't do anything the rest of your life, even if you don't become a doctor, I'd be proud to know you. Because you have a streak in you of goodness that we don't grade in medical school. So he had unconditional love for me. And he said, and you won't know how much the world needs that till you're 35. So he saw a future for me. And then he said, look at me, because I was crying. And I looked at him and he said, you won't know how much it matters to the world until you're 35. He pointed his finger at me and he said, you deserve to be on this planet and you're going to let me help you. So he stood up to the whole school and said, we're giving this one a second chance. So what happened is he took the hurt away. If he had said, if I can help you, give me a call, I would have gone back to my apartment and I'm not sure I would be here today. But he didn't do that. He grabbed me by the nape of the neck and he said, you're not going anywhere. So that's kind of my backstory. I hope that helps you understand. And then I took a year off and then I came back, finished, trained in psychiatry, and I just paid it forward, what he did for 40 years. And so I'm so pleased to be on this show, or for us to have a show, because I think if you look out in the world, people run away from hurt. You get hurt and you run away to drink. You run away to eat. Or you run away and get angry at someone because they've hurt you. They cut you off in traffic, and then you become hurtful. But I think if people could just pause in the hurt, not dwell in it, but pause for a moment, I think we could stop a lot of hasty and destructive actions, and that's what this show is about.
Yeah, and we came together over that understanding, didn't we? We appeared on each other's shows. I was on your podcast. You were on my show here on UK Health Radio. And we realized that we both had a burning ambition to help people get out of that, to help people move on from that hurt. Yeah. And so here we are. Yeah.
And let me mention also, because JJ and I bonded, and I saw the hurt in her because she's had a whole career of being a journalist, a reporter, and she's always been focused on other people's stories as if she was just a function.
Yeah.
Not a person. She's there to report a story. It's all about the other person. And, and as you go on in life, I felt the pain in JJ. She was saying to me, I have a voice. I'm not sure how interesting I am, but I do have a voice. And it would be nice to get it heard sooner or later. And can I mention Johann and my experience with him? Because I would love to hear from him. So Johann's the CEO of UK Health Radio, and he's going to share his story. But what I got from him is he had a heart attack. He was a great athlete. Well, not as great as his sister, but a decent athlete. And then he got cancer. It got taken care of, and then he got cancer again. And the conventional world said, sorry, we can't do anything. We think you're terminal. And Johann is not someone to dwell in hurt, but I'm sure when they said that to him, he wasn't happy, that he had fear, but then something inside him rejected it. And he said, I'm not dying. I'm going to live. And he found a way to do that. And from that, UK Health Radio was born. So, JJ and I, Johann, why don't you're a guest. What do you have to say about any of this?
Well, I was going to jump in first and just remind everybody that 10 years now, UK Health Radio has been going. We had a 10th anniversary just recently. Well done, Johann.
Hello, JJ. Hello, Mark. It's what a pleasure just to have been part of this first show of yours. For those first few minutes it was so powerful. Thank you very much for that. That's sort of puts everything in a nutshell. If I could put it that like that, sums it up. If that's not a 40 years of experience of looking and of learning and of listening to people, to the world and everything else, if that's not bringing it together to one point, I don't know what is. Thank you so much for that, Mark. That was really profound. Thank you.
Yeah, it was, Mark. It was really profound. And you're so right about me. And I did talk about not having found my voice. And I realized that part of my mission is to help other people speak out and give their thoughts and their voice, have a voice, which can be so helpful to other people, helping other people get through whatever hurt they're going through. So, hopefully I'm going to get better at that as well as we go on from this point forward.
So before the show, I had mentioned that I was up all night thinking of the monarchy. So I'm not sure if we're heading for a break and we should save that on the...
No, we're good. We're good for a while. Yeah.
Okay. So I've been studying the monarchy. And what I realized is what spoke out to me was the hurt that the monarchy felt. And I think, and again, this is just an American, maybe speaking out of school, whatever. But I think the purpose of the monarchy is to hurt more, to lend stability to the UK, and you feel the hurt, and And there's something too, don't complain, don't explain, or don't explain, don't complain. You're just there because you have all the political parties always warring. There's always one faction against the other. And so I think the purpose of the monarchy is to feel hurt and not do anything hasty, and to just be there. I think Edward, the Duke of Windsor, was not able to stand the hurt, and so he abdicated. And King George was kind of overwhelmed, but he was very duty bound. Well, I guess it's up to me. And then he had an untimely death. And then his daughter Elizabeth was just duty bound. Even in her opening, I remember watching some of her opening speeches. I am dedicated to this. And she didn't know she'd be dedicated to it for over 70 years. And I think all through the history of the monarchy, you see a lot of hurt. So Elizabeth couldn't have a carefree life because she was duty bound. Originally, Prince Philip couldn't stand the hurt, so he kind of acted up early on in their marriage. But then, as he got older, he was able to see the nobility of his wife and support her. And so he, even though he never lost his sense of humor, which was a little bit, edgy. And then you have Princess Margaret. She couldn't stand the hurt at all. So you see her life, her tragic life. Then you have Prince Philip. And Prince Philip didn't want to go to the schools he went to, but he needed to. Throughout his adult life, he's been in love with Camilla and
Prince
not
Charles,
Diana.
you mean, not Prince Philip, yeah?
No, excuse me, Prince Charles. So he felt a lot of hurt, but, he was the future king. And so he did the best he could. And then you have Diana, who wanted to give it a go, but she felt a lot of hurt because it felt like the royals were not that supportive of her. And when she discovered what Prince Charles was up to, it really ripped her apart. So much so that she did that book with, I guess, Andrew Morton, which was kind of scandalous, but it came out. And then what happens is she couldn't stand it. And tragically, it appeared she was finding some love in her life towards the end. And then she dies. And then the whole of Great Britain can't stand the hurt. When she dies, we just were transfixed by the funeral. And the hurt was so much that the Queen and Prince Philip and the family had to come in. I mean, the pain was so much when you think of Prince William and Prince Harry walking behind the casket. I mean, what kind of hurt were they thinking? And then it gets passed on, even to the next generation. And so what you have Prince Harry not really being able to take the hurt that he felt, especially when he fell in love with Meghan, who reminded him of his mother. And then he was so protective of her, and he felt that I can't protect her in the UK, so I'm going to move. And so you see this history of all kinds of hurt. And I'll even throw out a thing to the tabloids. The tabloids seem to be like the enemy in many ways. But if you work for a living and you're trying to support your family, you better get a good picture this week. You don't get a good picture, you don't get that money. And so I'm sure there's many people in the tabloids that say, we really don't like shoving a camera in Meghan's face or Diana's face, but that's how we get paid. And so I'm so pleased that we're doing this show because as I mentioned, I think people run away from hurt because they're afraid the next wound will take them down. So you get hurt. And instead of being wounded again, you run into alcohol, you run into food, you run into anger, and then you become hurtful towards other people.
Yeah, and there's a lot, or there was, at least in my day, a lot of alcohol consumption amongst us journalists. But I remember Diana's death very well. I had been out on the town after doing a late news reading shift and didn't get home till 3:00 in the morning. And I got woken up at 5:30 saying, "Have you heard the news?" Well, no, I've been asleep. And I got out of bed. I kept saying, no, I'm not going to, because I was freelance. And it was a German TV station, their London bureau called me, said, we need people to get out there and cover this. Would you do it for us? And I kept saying no, because I'd had 2 hours sleep and, anyway, in the end, I relented. And I was standing, I remember at one point in front of Buckingham Palace with people seeing me with a cameraman and leaning out of taxi cab windows, shouting "murderer," because everybody assumed that it was the media, the press, that had killed her, being chased through the tunnel. And it was an extraordinary outpouring of grief. It's something I'd never, ever experienced before. And almost they didn't know how to handle it. I don't think people had seen that before. And so the police, I think even the royal family, had not a clue as to how to handle that and how to really reassure or deal with it in any way. So yeah, it's a time that I will never forget. And yes, I mean, it is true, I think. I remember throughout my career as a reporter not being comfortable, for instance, having to knock on people's doors who've just suffered a bereavement and say, "Can you tell me all about it?" That was hard. Yeah.
Yeah, you're triggering a memory of me. It's I'm in the 11th grade in English class in Boston, where I grew up. And the news comes in, it's November 22nd, 1963, that JFK had been shot.
I remember that too. Yeah. And I'm going to say, hold that thought, because we are now just going to have a quick break. We're going to be back with more from Dr. Mark Goulston, and more from Johann, our CEO, right after this break when we hear from our sponsors.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Well, you're listening to Hurt Less, Live More on UK Health Radio, and I'm JJ, the Practical Alchemist. I'm here with Dr. Mark Goulston and our CEO, Johann Ilgenfritz. And back to Mark, and we were just hearing about a day which I think a lot of us of a certain age also remember, that day when we heard that JFK had been shot. Mark.
Yeah, so I grew up in Boston, and that, of course, that's where JFK was from. I might get emotional because I didn't know that on that day my innocence would be gone. It was the beginning of it. Because up until then, we all looked up to him. He was, charismatic. He was energetic. We didn't know about the scandals and you could look up to someone. You could believe in someone. You didn't have to, you could admire someone, and you didn't feel foolish for doing so. And then over the next several years, there's the assassination of Martin Luther King, the assassination of Robert Kennedy. I was in California in college when Robert Kennedy was assassinated in 1968, and I called my parents in the middle of the night. I said, "You got to get on the television." Why? Robert Kennedy was just shot in Los Angeles. I was up in Berkeley in college. But I think that for me, that triple hit took away my innocence. And I would say that I stayed sarcastic and cynical as a cover-up until the dean of students, until it didn't work anymore. And then when the dean of students reached in and said, you're not going anywhere, it just flipped a switch in my head. So I wonder, with the two of you, can you think of, now maybe you'll say, we British lost our innocence at birth. We don't believe in anything. But can you, either of you, can you remember incidents where, you know, there was a kind of an optimism, an idealism, and it just took a big hit with reality? Do either of you have any memory of that shift?
Johann, I'll let you answer that one first, if you can.
Yes, most definitely. I'm sure a lot of people can hear that I grew up in South Africa, and it was probably about halfway through my high school where the whole apartheid started becoming apparent to me. You know, when you're born into something, it's normal. It's not right, of course not, but that's not what I'm trying to say, not at all. And then when I finished school, I went to art school to study photography. And art school truly helped me wake up, if I could put it that way, because the arts are like that. They are real. Art is real. Art is, even though a lot of people think photography and fashion photography, which I did, is so artificial and stuff, and it is in a sense, but art is real. Art gets to the nitty gritty. And that, I think that was, Mark, if I could, you know, speak into what you were talking about, I think that was the beginning of my consciousness, if I could call it that, realizing what was going on in the country, realizing what you had to do to change it. And we did, especially as art students. Art students are always quite radically minded, and we acted upon that and in that fashion as well. So yeah, most definitely. I think that was the beginning of my awakening, the beginning of me realizing that what goes on in life, caused by people, through people, with people, is not always hunky-dory, is not always pretty, it's not always correct. It's the exact opposite. So yeah, I think that was probably the biggest question mark, if I could put it, even that came to light. And of course, in those days, it was so swept under the carpet that we had to inform ourselves on what the hell was going on and what had happened to get us to that point and what must happen to get us past that point. I think that was my coming to, if I could call it that.
And it must have been such a healing for everyone who had gone through any level of the apartheid system. When Nelson Mandela was released and he did become the leader, the real leader in the country, and did genuinely move towards reconciliation and healing, that must have been so good for everybody.
Oh, it definitely did. It split the country in two. I have to say that as well.
Yes.
I had the pleasure of photographing him twice for the magazines I worked for right in the beginning of my career as a photographer. It wasn't doing fashion at that stage yet. I was doing socials, party photography, and the ANC, the political party ANC had started, and they were having like weekly meetings, and I was fortunate enough to to have worked for a publishing company that part of the publishing company that had 5 magazines, but part of it was the first high gloss fashion black magazine. And it was called Tribute. I think it's still going, but don't hold me to that. And through Tribute, I had the opportunity first to photograph him the first time at a social. And then the second time, I actually photographed him for the magazine about a year later. So amazing, man. My goodness. It's, I think about it. So my first reaction was how tall he was. I'm not short either, but he towered over me, and he had this quiet confidence. Funnily enough, no hurt. You couldn't feel, I'm sure there was hurt, Mark, most definitely, but that he radiated was calm and togetherness, and we're all in this together, we're all going to do this together, which was unbelievable if you think he'd spent 25 years in jail, you know. So yes, absolutely incredible person, JJ. Just and as I said, it did split the nation right down the middle, and for a lot of also white people that saw what was going on, quite a few of us were stuck in the middle. So we weren't. We really were stuck in the middle between the two groups, you know. So it was an exciting time, actually.
You mentioned something very important. I think one of the best ways to respond to hurt is to have a higher purpose. One of my co-authors in a book that I wrote, 2 books I wrote during the pandemic. One was called Why Cope When You Can Heal, and the other one was called Trauma to Triumph. And my co-author was Diana Hendel, and she was the CEO of a hospital when an employee of the month came in and killed his 2 supervisors and himself on the property. And I had her on my podcast, My Wake Up Call, and she was just heroic to me. So I said, let's do some books together. And she said how the hospital recovered, you know, because, you know, you can't move the hospital. There, you walk by the place where the shootings took place. And she said it was finding a purpose. We're there to serve the community. We're there, you know, it was one of the larger hospitals in Los Angeles. And being able to throw themselves into that purpose didn't remove the hurt, but it seemed to help make it much more. And I'm guessing that Nelson Mandela had this incredible sense of purpose that was he was able to turn the hurt into something that where he could serve others. So JJ, how about you? Did you have a?
I don't know. I mean, where would I start? I don't know. But there are so many instances. I mean, I do remember when JFK was shot, and I remember even at the age of whatever, I was very young. I was a child, but I had a stamp collection, very small stamp collection, and I had a US stamp, an American stamp with John F. Kennedy on there and a candle. And the saying that was very widely known at the time, that he said, "And the light from this flame shall truly light the world." And I had a very clear feeling of how a light had gone out, even at that age, because those words had, you know, they'd meant something to me. I'd felt them. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe that was the beginning of at a very young age of realizing that sometimes things don't really go the way that you want them to. And sometimes, you know, people who, no matter what his background was or all the things and all the scandals that we've heard about since, he had some kind of purpose and it was stopped in its tracks. And I think that was probably at a very young age a similar experience for me. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Something we also talked about to give our listeners some tactics, I had mentioned something called FUHADS,
Yes.
FUHADS, and is that something that we should cover after the break, or how are we doing?
Well, we've got a few minutes left before we go into a break. So if you want to go through the FUHADS, which we've just been introduced to, then do so. Go for it.
So FUHADS, and by the way, if you see the movie, the Banshees of
Inisherin,
which is nominated for all kinds of awards, at least in America. Colin Farrell, and the other actor is
Brendan Gleeson.
Yeah. So I was mesmerized by the movie, and if you look at the characters, especially Colin Farrell, he goes through all of this acronym. So FUHADS, FUHADS, stands for frustration at having a friendship taken away from him, upset about it. The person said, Gleason said, I don't want everything to do with you. You're dull. Hurt that it was taken away from him. And still, Gleason didn't want to have anything to do with him and said, leave me alone. And if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to cut off my fingers. And he started doing it. And so there was frustration, upset, hurt. And then, Colin Farrell still didn't get the message, so he got angry. And then after the anger, he acted out by, I'm taking away the whole plot, he burns down Gleason's house, and he warns Gleason ahead of time that he's going to do that. And then after that, after he gets the anger out, you don't know what's going to happen to the characters. You have a sense of disappointment, just disappointment. Why did this have to happen? Why did disappointed in the other person, disappointed maybe in himself for having done that? And then the final letter is S, sadness. And at the end of the movie, which I've just spoiled for people who haven't seen it, they come back together, and they don't necessarily make up, but there's sort of a connection. And I bring this up because if you're in a relationship, right, and you want to communicate something as opposed to becoming angry or eating or drinking, write down frustrated, upset, hurt, angry, disappointed, sad. And the sad thing is most people rarely get to sad, because by that time they've done something destructive. But if you can write that down, and I think if you do write it down and you just express how you feel, if you can't have a conversation with someone because it will go into an argument, you could say, I just wanted to write down what's going on with me. And you don't have to respond to it, but I had to express it. I have a feeling that if you go through all of those, by the end of you expressing yourself, you're going to feel sad. And disappointment and sad are two emotions that you can actually have a conversation with the other person. Because by that time, you have calmed yourself down. And they may or may not go through the same things from their side. But I think if you do this, you're going to hurt less.
I think that's brilliant, Mark. I would really recommend anybody do that. I think always writing things down is a good idea anyway. But right now, have a think about that while we go for another break and we hear some more from our sponsors. And we'll be right back after this.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And we're back with Hurt Less, Live More with me, JJ, the Practical Alchemist, and Dr. Mark Goulston. And Mark, before the break, you were talking about FUHADs. I mean, is that something that you've done yourself?
I have. I follow that. There's actually some science behind it. There's a fellow at UCLA, a psychologist named Matthew Lieberman. I think he wrote a book called The Social Brain. And he basically said that when you can apply the actual word to what you're feeling, you calm down. So a lot of people get emotional, but they're not applying the word underneath that they're feeling. And to review what FUHADs is it's frustrated, upset, hurt, angry, disappointed, and sad. And I'm wondering, Johann, as you were listening to this, maybe you could apply it to part of your story.
It's unbelievable how many of them coincide with my story. My story being, as was mentioned in the beginning of the show, heart attack first, and then the first cancer diagnosis, which really left me in such a tiz, if I could call it that, because it was nothing else but that. It was just absolute mayhem, which is definitely upset, might not be exactly the frustration, probably came a little after that, but definitely upset. I was not myself. I was in a total state of panic and fear and whatever went along with that and goes along with that. Also, went into treatment, and the treatment left me feeling exactly the same way. It didn't help me from the mental point of view at all. I've mentioned this on so many occasions, but I wasn't told what to do. Nobody told me what to do or what not to do. They didn't say to me, do exercise or don't. They didn't tell me what to eat or not. And it was really frustrating. It was terrible, because my only duty was to be there for the treatment. That was the first diagnosis. After I got the cancer clear, during my first post-cancer screenings, they found that the cancer had returned. And that was the second diagnosis. And I like splitting them up, because my reaction between the first and the second diagnosis was so different. It was 180 degrees. And I'm sure that was because I'd been through the hurt and the anger stage and the disappointment of being 46 years old, playing tennis and doing all kinds of stuff, but still being then diagnosed with this, with the cancer. And, but the second diagnosis was totally different. I was focused. I wasn't waiting for it. It wasn't as if I was expecting it, but it should actually have been more of a blow, because it came out of the left field completely, But my reaction was totally different. My reaction was I'm going to do this. I'm going to beat it. So the first option didn't work. So what? Go and find another option or options. I had no idea what they were at the time, but that was my mindset. So, and I'm sure all these stages that I'd never heard of before. I have to be very honest with you, Mark. But they all fit into exactly what I went through.
It doesn't have to be that order. If you're listening in, as you said, I don't know that I was frustrated first. I was upset first, and it really doesn't matter. Although, if you go through whatever the order is that fits you, and you're able to journal, share it with someone, and if you're sharing it with someone who's interrupting you, you could say, no, I just need you to just listen. Yeah. I appreciate you want to help and give me advice and whatever, but I want you to just listen, and that'll help. And so you can go in any order. But I think, one of the last things, which is great for conflict, is when you can get to a stage of sadness, you're sad, but you're calm. So I don't want you to have to feel, oh, I got to fit this formula exactly. It doesn't matter the order of the steps.
Yeah, I must admit the sadness. Of course, it was there. I had really bad days. I was given 12 months to live, and the first 7 months I spent almost day in and day out searching for alternative ways, searching for the different options that I mentioned before. So of course there were sad days in there, but once I'd found it,
I would imagine also, and this might get you a little emotional, the thought of leaving your children without a father. I would imagine that got to you a little bit.
Two boys, one 11 and one 2 years old. The most beautiful wife you've ever seen in the whole world. And that's why you fight. That's why I fought. That was in the beginning, my reason to do what I did, to search, to go through everything I was for them, was not to see my sons go to school, to see them finish university, which my eldest son is in his second last year at university now. He's studying. It's so exciting. I'm there, I'm here. I mean, I'm here. I can see it happening, and that is, and the purpose. I don't think we must forget about purpose. Purpose is, in my case, the fuel that has brought me to this position in my life, which includes UK Health Radio, which includes my family, which includes my health, which I work on a daily basis. Optimize it on a daily basis, but that is what gets me up out of bed at 3:45 in the mornings, and that is what it just I think purpose is. I wouldn't want to add it to that, but I think purpose is the outcome. Mm-hmm. I think you did mention it, so it's probably not. It's not my wisdom speaking now, Mark, but I think purpose is definitely the outcome that you get from going through all that.
And I have seen the emails from you, Johann, that have been sent at something like 4:00 in the morning. So I know that you do get up then. But let's just remind the listeners, how long is it now since that diagnosis?
I was diagnosed in 2011, so it's almost 12 years. We're going on to the 12 years. I was given a year to live, 12 months to live.
And you've gone 12 years.
And here I am, 12 years, fighting fit. I ran 4 half marathons last year. I've booked 3 already for this year. Can't wait to get to them, to tackle them. I had, together with these amazing people from UK Health Radio, yourself, JJ, Mark, as the newest addition to our presenters, I have this. I've had this amazing privilege to build UK Health Radio with all of them, with all of you guys. You, the professionals, I'm not. The press here in the UK call me the curator of health expertise. And that's what I do. I'm not a health expert myself. I curate. I created a platform where we can spotlight, where we can feature, where we can help, etc. So, wow, it's been an amazing journey for me. It really has.
And it's amazing for us as well. And it's so lovely to be able to bring this new show to UK Health Radio, which is very different in focus to my other show. But I'm really excited to think of what's going to come when Mark and I really, get going on this journey together, because I think it is going to be a journey together. And I think that I'll learn certainly a lot as well on this journey. as well as our listeners. So I'm really looking forward to that. I don't know about you, Mark.
Oh, I am also. In fact, I'm going to give you a teaser of a future guest. He doesn't know it yet.
You can't do that. Oh, well, you can. Okay, go on.
No, he'll come on. His name is Nolan Bushnell. He started Atari, Chuck E. Cheese. He was Steve Jobs' first boss. He was on my podcast, my Wake Up Call. He was a great guest. But if you're listening in and you're a parent, he gave me these parenting tips, which were brilliant, which I didn't do with my kids, but my kids have turned out pretty well. And his tip to his kids, what he basically said is, and he's just, you'll love him. He just says, I graduated 247th in my class of 247. So I figured I was either stupid or just a little distracted. So I told my kids, my 8 kids, I said, grades are not important. Don't flunk out if our money is paying for your college, but, grades aren't important. He said, the only thing that's important in life is what did you learn today that you turned into an action that got an outcome? And don't expect the outcome to be great, because Atari was a piece of junk when we first started it. And one of the things, so if you're listening in, which he said was brilliant, he said, don't ask your kids, how was school? What'd you learn? What'd you do today? Because they've had 100 questions that day. That's why they go, fine, nothing, okay, because they don't want another question. And you're asking them the question to connect with them. You're not trying to grill them. You don't know what to do. And so what Nolan would do at the dinner is he would do with his kids, he'd say, teach me one thing you learned today. Not what did you learn today, but teach me one thing you learned today. And he wasn't checking a box. And Nolan is this lifelong learner. And he said, when you're really excited about what they have to teach you, they get excited. And when they teach you what they learned, they own it. And I thought that was just a little twist, but it was so brilliant. But we'll have him on the show, and the audience is going to fall in love with him.
Well, I'm sure they will. I think that's a brilliant piece of advice there. And it really does fit in with this whole notion of hurting less and living more. If you can get excited, that is such a different attitude. And if you can be encouraged as well at a young age, which is something that I didn't find a great deal in my own life. But, I can see how things might have been very different for me had there been more encouragement in the right way. I'm not saying that my parents were, sort of awful, but there wasn't the same kind of encouragement, the same kind of deep understanding. So I think that's a brilliant thing. And then we can have, bringing up a generation of young people who are so on it, so thriving, so living their lives to the utmost potential. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, that would be really, really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to drop a quote along what you're saying. When you don't necessarily get encouragement, and you sometimes get discouragement. I don't know who came up with this quote, but it was, when someone tells you no, it doesn't mean you're wrong or you shouldn't do something. It just means they won't help you.
Ooh, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I can see how that can be. Yeah, I wish I'd known that one when I was younger as well. But then, I was always pretty contrary when I was young. So I'm not sure that it would have made much difference one way or the other. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I love all these. And I have to say to everybody listening, Mark is full of these fantastic, quotes and, really helpful insights that can help us all stop hurting and living more. And Johann, it's great. Your story is so good. It's such a great example of how you took life by the scruff of the neck and actually just got on with it. Yeah. So,
and Johann, you may be a curator, but we're bringing you back on as a guest whenever we want. You're good.
There you go. There's a threat for you.
Recruited or drafted.
There you go.
I'll do my best, Mark. I'll do my best.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, Johann. It's been wonderful hearing your story and hearing about, I didn't know about your earlier life, as it were, as a photographer in South Africa, and, your experiences during apartheid. That was really, really interesting for me. And Mark and I, we will definitely have you back on the show. But for now, all I can say is we're coming to the end, and thank you so much. I'm so delighted, Mark, that we've got through our first ever show together without too much of a disaster going on. I think it's gone really well, actually. I think it's gone very well, and I'm really looking forward to being back here on UK Health Radio with you, Mark. What do you say?
Maybe we can bridge the gap between the UK and America. I mean, we need to build bridges. We need to pull people together, and I'm so looking forward to this journey with you, and you reining me in when I'm a little bit inappropriate.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward.
I'm not just American. I'm California.
Exactly. And I'm Scottish. So what a great combination. Mark, it's been a joy to be with you today. I'm looking forward to many more shows together. Johann, thank you so much. Join us again here on UK Health Radio for more of Hurt Less, Live More. And also remember to look us up on your favorite podcast channel as well. So until the next time, it's from me and Mark. Thank you and goodbye.